Welcome to Echoes from the Valley, our fortnightly podcast about life on a permaculture farm in southeast Queensland. Today we're going to be talking to Francine, the proprietor of Echoes in the Valley, about a subject called woofing. Now, I'm sure if you're like me, that will be the first time you've heard that word. Woofing is an acronym for Willing Workers on Organic Farms. And in order to get much more information about this, we're going to ask Francine questions about this. And so let's move straight along. And good morning, Francine. I hope you're well this morning on this lovely day. Can you fill in the people about what woofing is and how it's helped you on your farm?
Good morning, Pete. Yes, so woofing is a voluntary platform created by the Willing Workers on Organic Farms group back in the 70s or early 80s, I think it was. And back in those days, we didn't have electronic devices, so it was all done through magazines. And yeah, so it basically meant that international travellers could come anywhere in the world and work on farms, experience farm life, and in exchange, they didn't have to spend money and could just do a 4-hour to 6-hour day in exchange for accommodation and food. Since the electronic age, the HelpX and Workaway groups have taken that on as well. So now there's a few more platforms where international people can come and use those as a way of experiencing farm life and getting free food and helping farmers, of course, and maybe becoming part of a family while they're overseas.
How has woofing helped you on your farm, would you say?
Well, woofing has helped us immensely on the farm. When we first came here, the voluntary woofing program was available for the 88-day visa. And through that, we managed to get a lot of work done on this empty block. And that helped us until 2015. So we had 3 years of having wonderful people here and having an extended family from international backpackers and learning lots of skills from them and them learning lots of skills from us and experiencing a farm life. And that was quite a wonderful time, and it did help us immensely until it finally stopped due to the Liberal government putting a stop on it because they weren't getting taxpayer dollars.
Well, okay. Can you just explain to us about the 88-day visa? How does this function? How did this work? So the woofers, they're voluntary workers that work on the farm in exchange for accommodation and food. What is this 88-day thing you mentioned?
So yes, so basically to help farmers, the Labor government at the time gave international backpackers 88 days volunteer visa where they could come and work on any farm for 88 days. And for that 88 days, then they could, as voluntary workers, they could then apply for a second visa. And that was just to boost the farmers and get them up and going and help them along, as well as it was a great thing because it helped international backpackers travel and be able to experience farm life as well. When they couldn't maybe get work at the time, they could then go and do voluntary work for their second visa.
Oh, I understand now. So it's a mutually beneficial scheme. The people that are working, their incentive is if they put the work in, then they're able to get a visa from the government to stay longer in Australia. And from your point of view, you have people who are working, and it helps you out with your amazing workload, depending on the size of the farmstead, I'm assuming. But okay, so specifically, how has having these woofers running around your farm been of use to you? How would you sum that up?
Well, it's been an amazing use, but because at the time of the 88-day voluntary visa, we got a lot of work done to set up the farm. And then when the Liberal government stopped it in 2015 and then the drought came, we basically just spent our whole time, apart from being depressed, trying to keep the livestock alive and trying to keep the plants alive, which took up most of our day, and we never got ahead. Basically, we were just struggling to stay afloat in that period of time. And if we'd have had the help then, I'm sure we probably would be in a situation now where we would probably be making an income from the farm if that 88-day visa hadn't have been stopped. And we would probably be paying taxpayer dollars and employing people. But because that was stopped by the government, we just found ourselves struggling for the 5 years until this recent 88-day voluntary bushfire recovery program, which has just been started.
You mentioned bushfire recovery. This is a big program all over Australia after the devastating fires during the previous summer. This has now been opened up, even though borders are closed. People now who are over here on holiday visas, volunteers, they're able to specifically work on bushfire recovery. How has this particularly helped you? What are your bushfire recovery programs that are going on in southeast Queensland?
Well, at the moment, for us, we're getting a lot of fencing repaired that really needed attention. We fixed all our irrigation that was all broken and burnt and damaged. So that we'll be able to water the new plants that we've had to replant after a loss of many plants. And so we've had help with the machinery, fixing the machinery and rehabilitating the gardens. So I'm pretty sure anyone else who, unless they've had their properties damaged, like their whole buildings, then I don't know. I'm sure there'd be people helping with that. But for us, it's been a breath of fresh air because it's really boosted us along to get to the point where we're probably soon going to be starting to make an income. And that's where we should have been 4 years ago. And that's thanks to the reopening of the Bushfire Recovery 88-day volunteer program. It's really saved us as far as our mental state and our financial state. So it's been a godsend. And I really hope that the government thinks twice about closing it and that they do keep it open, because I'm sure there's a lot of farms around Australia that are still struggling to get ahead, and if they just kept that open, they would probably find a lot more income coming in taxes once those people get on their feet through the help of international backpackers helping on small scale farms, who also, when you add them all up, make a huge contribution to Australia and the government's tax dollars.
Yes, it seems that there are no end of problems in this lifestyle that you've chosen to follow. Um, but I'm more interested to know just how did you cope? Because obviously there was an ever expanding workload, a dwindling workforce, but many processes and animals depend upon you, and yet there was just you and Talia, your daughter. How did you cope with that experience, Francine?
Well, it was a real struggle. We mentally and physically and financially, we found it a real struggle to cope. And yeah, it was quite a really bad time for us during that 2015 and 2020 period. We had to give up on a lot of livestock, which we had been building up and breeding. We had to sell them because we tried for 3 years to keep them all, but in the end we just couldn't afford it anymore. It was costing us $600 a week just to keep them alive. We lost a lot of plants due to the drought, even though we were watering as much as we possibly could on a weekly basis. And to replace those plants, a lot of them were quite big even, and even a lot of the trees died during the drought. We just found it really difficult to cope with the whole doing this without any help. And we had no finances still coming in because we weren't fully set up when that second year volunteer visa had been squashed by the Liberal government. So yeah, we struggled pretty much.
Um, Now we know we're all familiar with what happened last summer during the bushfires all over Australia. And that's led to many changes at ground level, throughout government. And now we face another problem with international travellers. How is this affecting the volunteer programs, including the bushfire recovery, from your point of view?
Well, for us, it's actually, well, I'm not saying the bushfires were a godsend because they weren't, but the bushfire recovery 88-day program put on by the government and reopened has been a godsend for us because it's helped us get to almost to the finish line where we can now start everything that was put on hold for those 5 years is now coming to fruition. The backpackers that have come to help us are just wonderful, and it's just given us a boost of life and refreshed our mental stimulation because we were in a pretty doldrums sort of state during those terrible years. Yeah, so it's brought us closer to the finish line and back to where we can now almost start making an income and start employing some people hopefully in the near future.
Well, that sounds very positive. I'm sure you're looking forward to that period arriving and building upon that. I just have one question. I mean, it seems obvious to a layman that a scheme such as this is mutually beneficial to travellers, to young people that want to experience life, and especially Australia. And it's also beneficial to Australian farming at the sharp end, the actual work doers. Government programs are great, but how far do they go? Do they really get down to the roots? This is something that seems to me it's so obvious that it's so good for a lot of people. Why don't we expand this? I mean, what would you say would be the most important thing that you could say to the government in order to improve the situation all round for all people interested in this aspect of life?
I would say to the Scott Morrison government or any person that's pushing a pen in those departments that you need to start looking at the small farm holders because they're few and many. I mean, there's a lot of them and they are really a big contribution to the Australian way of life and to employing more people on the farms and in Australia. And by you keeping this 88-day volunteer program going, you should probably even expand on it. You would, and maybe even offer the volunteer backpackers $100 the week just to keep them on those farms, because at the end of the day, once those farms are up and running, they will be employing people and providing you with more taxes. So to just shun them and push them aside and not help them in any way because they're not big enough for you to see is a wrong attitude, and it's something that you need to start to realize that from small things, big things grow, and that's where you would be doing Australia a big favour by focusing not only on the big farms but also on the small farmers and helping them along through this program.
That's well said, I would say. I'm sure there's a lot of people nodding their heads right now. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time this morning, your very valuable time. I'll let you get back to work now, and I'll just say thank you for listening to us, and we hope that you'll join us again on our next podcast, which we'll make in around about 2 weeks' time. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete.